Okay, so let's talk about this, Bobby, real quick. To two things. As I mentioned earlier, Parkhurst came out of the block in 51, 52. They released this set. It's to me, it's aesthetically ugly. I'm not a big fan of it. However, it was critical because it was a major set post-war. It has all those things going for it, and of course, it's got the Hal rookie and I think the Maurice Richard rookie, and it's got some other
Yeah,
key rookies. Like it's got some key cards in it.
sure.
And then they come out with another set, but then they run consecutive years with consecutive sets, and it continues through 55, 56. So they've got that set. 56, 57 for some reason doesn't come out, and then it jumps to 57, 58. So what I'll do here is I will grab, let me do this. I'll
Okay.
start off with the first slide anyway. It has the tops as well, but we'll put it on here just for visual aids. We can do that. So there we go. So we've got the 54, 55 top set. I want to talk about that in a couple of moments, but we've got the 54, 55 Parkhurst as well. And then we've
Yeah.
got the distinction between the Canada US teams and the configuration. What can you tell us a little bit about what went on there in the 50s, especially in the mid to later 50s, where there was just like a break there? What happened there?
What I think we really should start from Parkhurst. I think
Sure.
this will help sum it up. So in the 40s, George Kennedy, who owned Parkhurst, he joined Wrigley's chewing gum as a plant manager or something like that. He worked there for many years, doing rationing kits for the war. And then in 1945, 40, no, after the war, 46, 47, he moved on into his own company. He started, I think it's called the Hudson Research Foundation, and he and the ex-president of Wrigley's got together and they started that, and they started making gum base. Actually, and they sold a lot of it to Warren Bowman hockey swell. And after that, he couldn't compete in the market. Surprisingly enough, he was 2 blocks away from Tops out of New York. He moved back to Canada and wanted to start his own business. So I think his involvement with Warren Bowman got him into coming into Canada and doing hockey cards, whereas Bowman was doing baseball cards back then.
Mhm.
So he started in 1948. They started with their first gum product, animal gum, and then he moved into the hockey cards in 51.
Mhm.
So from 51, he paid $5,000 to license, like he would deal with Frank Selke for the Montreal Canadiens. He would deal with Lester Patrick for the Rangers. And surprisingly enough, he dealt with Foster Hewitt for Toronto Maple Leafs. So he'd pay them $5,000 each for the licensing. And he had it in perpetuity for the longest time. And then Tops came in, and Tops disagreed with them in 1950. I'm thinking it's 50, maybe late 53 or 54. They because he had it in perpetuity with the NHL having the licensing, and after that, Tops came in and scooped the American teams away from him because he paid $15,000 per team, whereas he was paying $5,000 per team. So he ended up paying 15,000, ponied up, and retained the Toronto Maple Leafs and Montreal Canadiens, and he was making enough just with selling those anyways.
So, real quick question, just in contrast, I just want to
Yeah,
contrast this to baseball because the baseball side of it I'm a little more familiar with.
yeah,
So
sure.
so from a licensing perspective, rather than because for baseball it was individual player contracts, they would go and sign individual players. You're saying that for the hockey version of it, they were
With
signing
teams,
teams. Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
they dealt with the team owners
Hmm.
directly. It was a
Okay.
little different, you know. Anyways, after that, so they produce cards, 100 cards. So he's producing what 25 million cards his first year. So it's approximately, I guess, about a 250,000 cards sets per year. After that, he goes to 54, and then they drop down to about 18 million cards, or about a little bit less than a 250,000, obviously. So he's producing that many cards because Tops came in and scooped out the 4 American teams, so he's left with 2 of the Canadian teams. So here we are. We have 54. We have the 60 card set, and then we have a 100 card set with the Parkhurst. Um, Tops comes out of the gate. They have an insert. They have 6 cards plus gum, And they also had the penny packs, which is very typical to the, I guess, football and baseball of that time. They had penny packs. We've never had penny packs. This is a 24 count box. Now, I talked to the gentleman from OPG who drove down to the train station to pick up all the cards, I think the wrappers and the boxes, I think he said, and he picked them up and brought them back to OPG to pack them here in Canada at OPG factory. Mm-hmm. Parkhurst, they come out, they have the Lucky Premium backs. So they're trying to compete because they know they're competing against each other.
Now, since you mention it here, because the 54-55 Parkhurst is a set I'm somewhat familiar with because I have been collecting it slowly over the years. In terms of the differentiator between the Lucky, so they would have the front of the cards being the same, but then they would have regular cards with the regular backs, but then they'd also have those Lucky Premium ones like the one you're showing there on this display here. In terms of production numbers, are they kind of even? Because I don't recall there being like a major premium on the premium backs at all.
Well, there was a time where they were disregarded. I think there's only 21 out of the 20 or 30 out of the whole set that have the premium back, but most of them had the regular backs. Okay. There was a time until about 5 years ago, and then everybody started to jump into the premium backs, going, "Oh, that's the good variation. That's the one that we should chase because it's a little harder."
So it's not a complete set variation. It's certain specific cards.
It is not. No.
Got it.
Only certain cards, and there was only 3 premiums offered.
Got it.
So they're both coming out head to head. So Topps brings out 6 cards in gum. They have 4 cards in gum. Big difference. Now they come up with a premium Lucky back. The Topps had various different wrappers. This is just one example of what was inserted. It wasn't in the 1 cent packs. It was only in the 5 cent packs, and it was wrapped around the cards before the wrapper went around the cards. So they offered many different things, but it was only through the US you could acquire them. So like the premiums, they were also offered in baseball. They were also offered in football as well. Mm-hmm. So I think it was kind of, well, we'll just throw it in with the hockey too. And that's what happened with that going from there.
And I will say, based on the examples you're giving, Topps was also very good and ruthless when it came to marketing, because they understood how to market the amount of cards in the pack. They would give the value proposition. They would say, like, look, for what we're offering you, because they did that to Bowman. We're offering bigger cards. We're offering brighter cards. We got more cards per pack, all this stuff, bigger checklists, everything they could do to be like market.
Well, they already had 5 years of the bigger cards. That's what made George Kennedy change to larger cards, because he said notably that baseball cards were bigger. And really, when they were starting out and they were sort of greenhorns, he wanted to keep as many cards on the sheet as possible to keep their cost down. And that's why he did the smaller cards. And then he slowly grew from there. But I think he realized in 1953 that, and they had started saying giant, I think the year prior to this, in 1953, they were giant cards. And then it continued on in 54 with giant cards. Right. So they kept on going with that giant card, and it's getting bigger. So it was just a ploy to catch up with sort of the Topps marketplace.
Mm-hmm. And I will say it's also interesting, and we'll talk about the Topps piece in a second, but it is also interesting that as a result, Topps came out of the block with this 54 set, which is aesthetically a beautiful set and all that. And then, as we mentioned earlier, there is a gap. But then when Topps comes back, they're standard card size again. So similar to the 57 Topps baseball, they had returned to the standard size. So in reality, in hockey, they only produced this premium size card like what they had done in the 50s in baseball one time. And just one time. That was it. Later on, there'd be the tall boys, which is a different configuration, but that's in the 60s. That's a different conversation. But in the 50s, they would produce this large card size one time.
Well, it's still new in the hobby, or in the industry, sort of, at that time. That have a larger card is good.
Yeah. So let me quickly grab Victor's question here. So to me, and please, Bobby, if you've got an opinion on this as well, for me, the Gordie Howe is just the iconic card in the 54 Topps. It's just the iconic card. It's not even a rookie card. It's just the Gordie Howe, that card that's on the screen right there.
It's the Topps rookie.
Yeah, sure, exactly. Yeah, exactly. This is a 52. This is the 52 Topps Mantle thing all over again, isn't it?
It is. It almost is that point. You know, a lot of people who really enjoy the Topps.
But it is an iconic card. Like, it is a legitimately. I went out of my way to go get my copy, because I knew that down the road the price would keep going up, because it is an iconic card. And like we mentioned, it is a one-off. The one time that they use this card size, and then Topps would go to the standard card size after that. And then Parkhurst went its own path, its own way, separately from that. O-Pee-Chee itself, now this is where it's interesting. There is no O-Pee-Chee at the stage.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
Oh, but for hockey in this format, or what
Yeah.
are they doing?
Well, I told you the guy from O-Pee-Chee drove down to the now on the bottom of that box. It's a 24 count. Now, every O-Pee-Chee box has always been a 36 count. American is 24 count. They only changed that in 1974. Where
but I'm talking about in 1954. Is there an O-Pee-Chee set?
This is O-Pee-Chee.
Which one? The Topps card there?
Yeah. It's not distributed in the United States as far as I know.
Okay.
However, I have heard New York stories because it's out of New York. I have heard that they may have been distributed in New York, but there hasn't been really any proof. And I talked to the gentleman who went to the train station. That's from O-Pee-Chee. The guy was directly from O-Pee-Chee. He worked there. I don't think he's around anymore, but that was about 15, almost 20 years ago that I talked to him. And he told me that story, and it was the most wonderful story I've ever heard. Well, I went down by myself in the truck, and I just, they told me to go down and pick up all the stuff. So they packaged everything up here. Now, on the bottom of each box, it would be defined if it's Topps or O-Pee-Chee. In the early years, obviously it's O-Pee-Chee. It's Topps. So this has a 24 count, which is a Topps typical. Has Topps on the bottom of the box. So basically, we have to say it's a Topps issue. Was it distributed in the U.S.? That is the question.
Okay.
I believe it was not. I don't think it was licensed to be distributed in the U.S., and I don't think hockey was that popular. Even in an article in 1964, you had the Topps top executive and Don Urquhart, who was one of the top O-Pee-Chee executives at that time. They were commenting back and forth, and the Topps executive said, "We look forward to having hockey cards in the United States." So that means they really never had them. Did they get there? Sure, there was wholesaling. We're close to the border. O-Pee-Chee.
So basically, you're saying that the Topps cards there at the top were distributed predominantly in Canada. Of course, they made it down to the States because stuff makes it down. So be it. But effectively, they were produced in, I guess, O-Pee-Chee factories, or at least
they weren't produced. I think they were produced down in the U.S. and shipped up to Canada for distribution. It's such an American set. Look at the red, white, and blue. Yeah. It's so classical.
Yeah, but on the card themselves, anywhere, it will not acknowledge O-Pee-Chee anywhere on the cards themselves or anything.
On the wrapper, it does.
On the wrapper, okay.
Yeah. On the side, it'll say manufactured by Topps, but in Canada, manufactured by O-Pee-Chee.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then technically the answer to Victor's question is the same card. It's the Gordie Howe or the Gordie Howe.
Well, if you look at the two Gordie Howes, which one would you like?
Well, I think the I'm fortunate that I've got both of those cards. I went out of my way to get those earlier. The Parkhurst I got first, but the Topps I got later on. Now, I would say that for me, aesthetically, the 54 Topps or 54 O-Pee-Chee, if we're in this case, for this discussion, Gordie Howe, to me, is the iconic card. But I do enjoy the Parkhurst ones because I do like that they took the all-star players and put a little star behind it. It is a different aesthetic. They put the card number on the front and then the facsimile signatures on both of them. I do think there's a little bit more going on with the Topps version because you've also got the logo on there.
Yeah. Now, it's very interesting that they both come out in 1954 with Parkhurst says all 6 teams. So had they signed a deal, this is the part we don't know, but had they signed a deal already that they said, okay, we're going to do the next year, we get all 6 teams, but after that, you get only 2 teams of the Toronto and Montreal, and then Topps goes to 4 teams of the Americans. So I think there was something done prior to that.
Now, do you think that was a factor in kind of the consideration in that, because having only 2 teams, I only remember a little bit about the checklist of 55, 56, but I believe it was the 2 teams, but then they filled it out with legends. They did like old time greats or something like that. Like they filled out the checklist.
Not in 56. This year. In 55,
no, 55, 56, the next year.
Not to my understanding, no.
Yeah. I'll double check it, but I'm pretty sure that they filled it out because I know that they needed, because with only 2 teams, you'd have a very small set anyway, but you could stack it to a certain degree, but then you'd have to keep filling it out. I'll take a look while we're talking. But can you explain?
Well, no, they had all 6 teams right in 54, so they had enough to fill out. They didn't need to have
I'm talking about the next year, 55, 56.
So 55, you have Toronto, Montreal for Parkhurst. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, just taking a look here.
Yeah, we can go to the next.
Okay, so 55, 56. So hold on. So I'll put on
Okay,
the
so we'll graduate. I hope everybody understood what I said there. There's a lot of information to take in.
yeah. So no, I think the checklist backs up what I was looking at because I remember I was checking on it earlier
Yep.
because they've got Turk Broda, Joe Primo, Chuck Conacher, like Sil Apps. There's a back end to King Clancy, Hap Day. There's a whole stack of.
Oh yes, of course. In that, okay, I got
That's
you.
what I'm. That's what I'm referring
It
to.
wasn't
Like a
the
lot.
all-time greats from '60. I
Yes.
get it. Yeah, I got it.
They fill in the checklist with a lot of these players because they only have the two Canadian teams,
Yeah.
but they still have a 79 card checklist. So it's like you got to fill it in with something. So you've got legends, lots of legends.
So they got 79 cards in the set in
That's right.
1955.
Yeah.
There's no tops to be had. Why is not tops not around? I think it was a licensing issue at that time. I think they were figuring things out between Parkhurst and Tops. We really don't know to be factual, but I believe that Parkhurst and Tops were kind of fighting it out a little bit. I tried to look up court cases to see if there was any precedents there or anything happening, and nothing has come up in my searches.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that it didn't happen, but a lot of times that was the big thing. I know Tops said that it wasn't fair that Parkhurst or George Kennedy had the NHL in perpetuity, and I know Tops fought that, and that's why they bought out the teams at a $15,000 rate. They could have bought them out of $10,000; they would have been better off. But unfortunately, they all had to pay 15 at that time, and that's when the team started to realize this is some money in there.
Mm-hmm. But this is what makes it interesting. The reason I wanted to talk to you about this is because obviously you've done the research, you've got the background in it, but also it's always been this interesting situation because to your point, you've got in baseball, because it was player specific, you could have sets like 53 tops where you'd be missing 6 cards, but it was like a player contract issue. They were going to put these players in, but then Bowman had the rights. So they had to pull them basically from circulation. So a 280 card set only has 274 cards. Specific cards are missing that never existed. We can speculate about who those players were. We can make good educated guesses about who should probably have been in that set under normal circumstances. But because it was team specific in the hockey realm, it creates this weird scenario where for 55, 56, you've got 2 Canadian teams, a stack full of Hall of Famers as filler, a ton of Hall of Famers as filler, classic all-time players. But then the 4 American teams are not even there.
But they're used to doing 100-card sets, so they're trying to fill it as much as they can as sheet.
Yeah, and as a result, though, because Topps isn't doing any, there's no American players at all.
Well, it's interesting this year. I think he's getting the most amount of money or bang for his buck because he puts up the 55 Parkhurst 79 card. Yeah. So there's only 2 Canadian teams. So what does he do also to make money? He puts it out through Quaker Oats cereal. Now he's not new to cereal inserts. He's done that prior years and actually following years as well. Yeah. So he's trying to get the most out of his money. You have to understand they're selling 5-cent packs. And you're paying $15,000. You better put out a little bit more stuff. So I think that's why he doubled down and said, okay, let's go here. Let's go here. We'll get our money out of it. We'll be happy.
So this was the early version of the Prism parallels, because effectively you've got these 2 parallel sets and the differentiator is this back.
Yeah. Now, there was short prints in that, most people don't know about the 55, 56 Quaker Oats is that, they short printed the King Clancy and the Richard and a few other cards for a bicycle promotion. You could win a bicycle if you can include them. And they're so short printed. It's unbelievable. They're very rare. It'd be $25,000, $30,000 for one of those. That King Clancy's about $25,000, even miscut.
Even with the miscut, huh?
Yeah, it's just crazy because they really short printed back then. In 1920s, they did that with the short printing. I think there was a law drawn up in Canada that you could not short print cards to kids. I forget what it was called, the act. And they did it here, surprisingly enough. And they did one sheet. I can see the sheet that it continues on, that it's all the short prints are all on one particular sheet. So they were just inserting certain ones. So they kind of got away with it. They were really sneaky. I don't think George Kennedy was sneaky. He was very honest, very good man. I just think he figured there's only so many bikes we can give away. I guess we're going to have to do something here.
Yeah.
Is it?
I think also at the same time, one other thing that would get in my mind as well. It's very funny to me, is that so you've got this Quaker Oat set. So this is cereal and not oatmeal, right? This is the cereal.
It's a cereal.
Okay.
Yeah, there's the box right there if you can really see
Yeah,
it.
the puff rice one. I just wanted to make sure because it did look like it was a cereal. I just wanted to make sure. I don't know if I'd have eaten the Quaker Oat cereal. I was like, do I really need a hockey card this badly?
There were some different other ones there, you know.
Yeah,
so yeah, exactly. They weren't pre-sweetened syrup like we're used to. It wasn't like corn pops or anything like that. That's a pretty.
Let's just say it was a much easier sell when we're talking like Kellogg's or Sugar Crisp or something, or
Yeah.
if you throw that in Captain Crunch, Bobby, I'm in. You throw that in Captain Crunch, I'm in.
I did some research in the Toronto Star newspaper. Somebody in 1955 put an ad in the want ads looking for certain cards from this set, and it's the short prints. And this is a want ad, which cost a lot of money back in the 50s to do that. And it just shows you how many people were really into this set.
Mm-hmm. So I've got the next one here that has 56 tops and Parkers. You want me to show that one?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll put it on here. So these are some other kind of sets that do include hockey players in them. Some kind of different sets.
These are the missing links, let's just say. So we're in 56, 57. So you have no tops, you have no Parkhurst. So what happened through those years? Now, this is the self-developing cards came out, Sun Products, even tops in 1949, 48. This year, they both come out. Tops comes out with Hocus Focus, and it's just a Gene Billable card, but there's also baseball. There are also other sports involved. And as well, Parkhurst in 1956 comes out with Photo Magic. Now, Photo Magic, there was a CFL set, if people have seen those self-developing cards, they're 1956 as well. So they're really filling the gap here with Photo Magic. They're filling it, they had, what was going on that time? There was, what was the other two? They had the CFL and they had the wrestling cards. So they got a lot going on in the
Yes, Parkhurst had the wrestling
era.
cards around that era. That's right. Yeah.
So, they're trying to fill the gap here. So they have 60 cards in this set. We have documented 25 since for the last 30 years. They're just unseen, unheard of. Then, what you do is you pull it out of the pack and you get spit and you'd wet it and then put it on this blotter that came in the pack and it would self-develop. And then most of them are poorly self-developed, so you can't really see them. But there's some great stars in here. You have Richard, you have Duff, Horton. And we only found, I think, 5 or 6 of the hockey cards. Okay. So very, very obscure set. And the Hocus Focus we know is around. It's been around. There's 2 different variations. There's penny packs. There's the nickel packs where it came in a panel of 4. And so they're both doing something, but a little bit hockey, but not really anything. They're kind of just, I think they're in negotiations at this point.
So is this something that would have been covered by the contracts they had signed, or is this something they did to kind of skirt them, to kind of avoid the issue?
I think it was skirting. It was sort of, well, it wasn't like today, like, how contracts and lawyers.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different back then. Remember, George Kennedy is dealing with Foster Hewitt for Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, he's sitting there going, okay, whatever, I got to announce the game tonight. What are you talking? Yeah, okay, good. He doesn't really care. So I think they're kind of going through this legal issue, semi-legal issue, and they're trying to figure things out right now. Now, baseball's continuing on with the OPG, right? The Canadian.
Yeah.
And we're continuing on with the CFL, not the football, but the CFL's kind of coming in as well.
Yeah.
So they have bases basically covered. So they're kind of riding the wave and seeing where they end up. So then we end up at, I guess, the last year. What happened through these years? We don't know, but I think it's legal. It has to be. There's no other reason why Topps would not and Parkhurst would not put out. But this is a great issue to put out. And self-developing the same year, that's kind of weird. It was like this technology was coming in and they all wanted to jump on board, but we don't have the licensing. How they got Gene Bellable, I have no idea. I'm very surprised that Topps came out with a Canadian player.
Well, that's the reason why I was asking if it was a way to skirt the contract, because if Parkhurst has the Canadian teams, then including any player from the Canadian team seems kind of an interesting choice, especially because, like I said, in the baseball example, it's player based. If I have the exclusive contract for Mickey Mantle and you try to make a Mickey Mantle card, we got a problem. It's very straightforward. It's cut and dry. I've got the contract. You don't. Get out.
Canada's like another country, so they're dealing with the teams.
It's
It is really.
It's like another country, so to speak. Yes.
So here we are.
So now we've got two sets. So now Topps has returned, and now they're back to a standard size format. They're in the what is today the modern size, hockey card or baseball card or whatever. And they've got the 4 U.S. teams, and we got the 2 Canadian teams for Parkhurst.
Well, didn't Topps start the 2.5 by 3.5 in 1957?
57 Topps baseball, yes.
Yes.
That's right.
So they just mimicked that. They just went to that and said, okay, we're going to keep that as a standard card.
Right.
So Topps comes in, nothing special at all. And same thing with Parkhurst. They just kind of said, okay, we both have our licenses. We're both going to deal with it, and we're going to go straight forward from here. They're paying $15,000 each for 2 teams, and they're paying $15,000 each for the 4 teams. There's no way he could afford $90,000 at 5-cent gum. It just doesn't work with artwork and all the things that he had to do. Like they started in September, they get the photos, and then October they start working on the artwork and they start producing, and then they release in January, Parkhurst. So anyways, so we have 57. They both come out. They're in competition with each other. This is an interesting year. I put glassine wrapper. Now, what a glassine wrapper is, sort of like, it's not wax. It's more of a rice paper type, a little bit stronger. Okay. Just trying to give it a common comparison. So glassine is almost like when you open it, I don't think they did this in baseball, Carlos. The glassine, when you open it, it's almost like opening a cello. It'll tear. And see, that's a sealed pack, but it's just torn. And it would tear very easily. I'm very surprised that Topps would come out with that. I think they were experimenting and trying different and new things.
Ironically, it's good for anti-counterfeiting because it's, to a certain degree, like if you open it, you open it.
It's yeah, it's pretty much. That's why that wrapper is so hard to find today. It's very difficult, and people don't know why. Well, because it's not a wax wrapper. The only other time a glassine wrapper was introduced was in 1933 with O-Pee-Chee. Their second series wrapper was glassine, and we've only seen one example out of 10 others from the same year, from the first series. Sorry, and Parkhurst here 57. So what they did here, and I should have put a comparison in there, but I only have so much space. That's a repeat display box from 1953. They had it black and yellow, and they kept the same box except they changed the colors. They go to a checklist wrapper where they have a lot of errors on the spelling of players. There's like 7 or 8 players that are misspelled on there. It's quite surprising. So there we go. We're going forward from there, and then the battle's on, I think, at that point. And that's where I do
find it interesting that, ironically, comparatively to the 54 year, where Topps built one of the probably aesthetically nicest sets of that time period, then they come out with this 57 effort, which is, it's okay. But I would say this time I prefer the Parkhurst design just a little bit more. It's cleaner. It's more straightforward. Yeah, it's ironically it borrowed some of the design elements that made the 54 work for me. It's. I
think they were stealing off of each other.
Yeah.
You're looking at what you came at. There's an article I sent to you before. It was called Battle of the Brands, and they were in competition, so they were trying to fight each other. You know, Parker said he was selling the same amount with 6 teams as he was with 2 teams. So the 2 teams were carrying the Toronto and Montreal because it was Canada, and then they're trying to sell American teams. The only other guy was Gordie Howe, Sawchuk, and a few other guys. So they really had the marketplace, Parkhurst, at that time.
The great irony is if they had been able to arrange specific contracts for Howe, Sawchuk, and the handful of players, they would have been like, yeah, you can keep the rest of the team. I'll take Howe, Sawchuk. Just give me those guys, and then you can have the rest of them, and I'll take the Leafs and Canadians, and I'm good to go.
Yeah, and then in 1961, Parkhurst wrangled the Detroit Red Wings away from Topps somehow. And we don't know what happened there. It's all a lot of sketchy information, but they have the 3 teams now, and Topps only has 3 teams as well.
Yeah. It was always, hockey was always kind of interesting to me because I didn't have the background in it. Although I did notice those nuances. You'd have like 2 teams on one side, a couple of teams on the other side. And then of course you had those gaps that we were talking about. I just thought it would be kind of helpful to be able to actually talk about a couple of those things, because it's one of those deals where it's like, you can read it, but then you're looking at it like, okay, why? Like, from a little blurb, you know, I've got the guide and stuff like that, but you're only going to get so much from a little blurb. It's not a lot of information to help you.
Yeah, that's why I really enjoy writing articles about this stuff, just to get that information out there, especially about Parkhurst in their earlier years and what George Kennedy went through. You know, he had a lot of interest in sort of, he kind of got exposed to gum by accident, really. And sure enough, he's, yeah, he went on to make Paxton. So what happened in the end, I guess, it was just too much money for him to carry on. It was costing a lot of money for artwork and production and all the other stuff. And he's making margarine and saran wrap for Dow and doing all that subcontracting. And he's making 20 times the money. And he's just saying, this hockey card thing, forget it. It's just the gum production. It's too much on our line. It takes up too much time. He liked doing it. He always liked offering things to kids. Like a lot of his had promotional albums, which Topps didn't have. They did in 60, 61. But you know, Parkhurst was quite revolutionary. He was concerned about the kids getting the right product out, but it was just the battle between contracts that he had a really hard time with.
I think that's the other contrast that made it kind of interesting is that in baseball, what it came down to was that Bowman couldn't compete anymore because they were in direct competition. They were fighting for player contract, individual player contracts.
That's tough. That's tough.
And it became this ground war where Topps, once they got the advantage, Topps just kept pressing forward on the advantage, and you know, eventually they were able to basically spend Bowman effectively out of business to the point it's like, well, you can keep fighting or you can sell out. And then Bowman said, all right, you know what, fine. They capitulated. And Bowman himself got out of the business at the right time. He got out of business basically on top, got his money, and got to leave while he got to say, hey, while I was running, it was still on top.
Yeah.
Then you guys screwed it up. It's like, well, he knew the writing was on the wall a little bit. So it's like, okay, you know, the end is coming. But in hockey, it was just like, we can't.
I know.
Yeah, in hockey, it was like, yeah, it was money, but it was also like, I don't feel like paying it anymore. I could have, but I don't want to, which is a little different.
Yeah, in retrospect, you know, them having the two teams, they were the major players in the NHL at that time. You had Bouchard, you had Mahovlich, you had, you know, so many amazing players. The American teams didn't so much. So they had a harder time selling. I believe they had a harder time selling. O-Pee-Chee started taking over production, I believe, on the bottom of the 58 box, it says Somerville. It's printed on the bottom. Now, Somerville, if anybody knows Somerville, in 1888, Somerville gum was invented by Mr. Somerville. I forget his first name. So he started a box company and a gum company. And in 1911, it turned into O-Pee-Chee. So Somerville gum and Somerville gum split into O-Pee-Chee, and Somerville stayed as the box production. O-Pee-Chee went on to be the gum company that we all know and love today. That's the difference. So in 19 what was it, 58, on the bottom of the box, it says Somerville Packaging. So it's the box company. It had to be made in Canada. So we know in 1958 that O-Pee-Chee had taken over all production of at least boxes. It had to be wrappers too at that time. So Topps had their influence in 1954. They had their influence in 1957. 58 on, it's all O-Pee-Chee. Why isn't it not called O-Pee-Chee? Topps owns the license. That's the end result.
Yep. No, that's fair.